Gents, bloody love the pod. Came across your pod a few months ago whilst pregnant with my firstborn, who is currently 8 weeks old. I've listened to so much of your back catalogue. As someone who has significant childhood trauma, is trying to break a generational cycle and be attentive, available and regulate my emotions. So, when I was pregnant, I sought out advice and information that would help me do better, and I found your pod, and oh boy, am I grateful for it. I'm emailing you today for the first time as I am neurodivergent. I've got dyspraxia, and my husband is undiagnosed ADHD. So while this is in mind, I want to make sure I'm present enough for my son, that I know what signs and milestones to look out for that might indicate he's also neurodivergent, and then how I best support him. I know this may depend on an individual's needs, but as a child who was not diagnosed till I was 16, who hated school, felt stupid, and whose self-confidence still suffers as a result, I want to do what I can to avoid the same experiences for them. Thanks again, gents. The work you do is so key for so many. In my experience, most new parents don't have a traditional village community they used to, and I think the pod is going a ways to help reduce the gap that we have in our support network. Cheers.
There's a clinical answer to that, and then there's like a more philosophical one. The clinical one about early signs, it's really interesting. A lot of the research, what they did is they did retrospective analysis. So what they did is kids who had a diagnosis of autism, say at like 10, they would go back and watch old birthday videos and observe what the differences in the kids were. And it kind of is in alignment with what we see as early deficit-based stuff, which is usually non-verbal communication. That's often the early experience, or sensory overwhelm. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So those are often the early signs, even when we follow kids. So say we know that, there's an increased chance if your parents are autistic or have ADHD or whatever, if we watch then those kids really closely, the earliest signs we catch that are identifiable to clinicians like me are often around sensory overwhelm or complexities of language such as non-verbal communication, not language delay. So language delay is not associated with it. Like Charlie's behind in his language development. The majority of kids his age that are behind in their language development will not end up with a neurodevelopmental diagnosis.
Yep.
It's about 15% of 2-year-olds will have that. About 6% of kids at school entry will have it because there's new kids that emerge. Majority of them, by the time they hit school, will not have language delay. Another beautiful thing, though, around clinical examination, when you watch these kids really closely, they actually show strengths before this in things like pattern recognition and discrimination. Like these young kids in like early first 1 or 2 years of life are actually better at doing things like picking the odd one out of patterns and things like that. And this is their attention to detail. This is their ability in their brain to pick up every bit of information. Now, that's also the reason that sensory environments can be really overwhelming because so much is coming in. But also when they can focus on stuff, they will discriminate better. So they might struggle with discriminating facial expressions, but geometrical patterns, for example, they're much better at it. And so it's this really interesting difference in the way that their brains work. Now, there's also a philosophical question around we should just watch every kid and see how they're going. And I completely understand someone being like, I wish I'd been identified earlier, but we should actually be using the same lens on every kid. What's their experience like? Are they succeeding? Are they having growth in the things that matter to them? Are we unintentionally pushing them towards things that actually cause a lot of strain, sensory overwhelm, social fatigue, all of that stuff from an early age? Like toddlers, a lot of toddlers will struggle with this. Yeah. So thinking about what does success look like?
It's going to be hard to see early signs, because I don't know, I'm just thinking about kids before 3. I have no idea. So just, you're the clinician. I completely can see that. But I'm so much going on for between 1 and 3, I reckon, for a kid.
Yeah.
And I just find boys then as well, not discriminating. I just see boys that age. I always find it sometimes if their language is like a touch behind the girls, they get that general end of like frustration where they're just short on the words. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Am I making this up?
No,
am I like,
it's totally.
just see that, like I'd find it's so hard.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like what.
So as an expert could probably see if a kid's.
Oh yeah, but I'm still bad at it with my own kids. But I Evie needed more support in her emotional regulation, so that's what I help her with. She doesn't need any help with her language. Do you know what I mean? Charlie is fine with his emotional regulation. He needs help with his language. So I go to his specific need, but I'm not making it awful for them. Like it's fun. It's really interesting. I thought there was going to be heaps of questions about therapy, like what's the best therapy? And so I was like excited to talk about that, and almost none came in. So it just shows, like, which is what I do in clinic. I'm like, there's heaps of stuff I want to talk about. What do you want to talk about? And the community didn't seem to want to talk about that. But I'll still fit a little bit in here. A lot of one of the best evidence-based stuff, especially in the early years, which is kind of naturalistic, environmentally based, like let's do what you're doing instead of sit in like a structured therapy environment, is just getting down on the floor and playing with these kids. Do you know what I mean? And I can get down on the floor and play with Evie and help with emotional regulation, and I can get down on the floor and play with Charlie and help him with his language development. Do you know what I mean? Because it's playful. They lead it. And with Charlie, I'm helping him identify different objects, communicate his needs, experience success when he's using vocalizations, whatever. With Evie, I'm helping her when she gets frustrated, validate that experience, connect with it, understand it, and then learn what works.
Yep.
Yeah. Good. Hopefully that's helpful.
No, very helpful.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just you're just sending me. I'm getting that 1,000-yard stare because I'm just thinking about my own kids when you're going through this. And then I have to go back. Sorry, I just.
But it's a constantly evolving thing, isn't it? Like, your needs are going to change all the time. There'll be times where you're like this, cruising, and there'll be other times where you're like, oh man, I'm really worried about them.
How do I find that game to connect with my kid on that thing that they need to work on? Find it hard, Billy.
This podcast is brought to you by Guiding Growing Minds, a social enterprise that aims to give all children the best opportunity to reach their potential and succeed in living rich and meaningful lives.